Ever wonder what a dean of faculty actually does? Like, really, beyond the fancy ceremonies, what's their day-to-day like?
It's a question more people probably ask than we realize, right? I mean, we're diving into these articles about them, and let me tell you, it's way more than just academic robes and whatnot.
No dusty old books and endless faculty meetings, then.
Not exactly. The RoleCatcher Career Guide paints a picture that's surprisingly, well, dynamic, even a bit entrepreneurial when you get down to it.
Okay, before we get to the entrepreneurial bit, let's start with the basics. If you had to sum up a dean of faculty's role, what would you say? What's the elevator pitch?
Hmm, good question. Imagine being the executive, for lack of a better term, for a whole slice of the university. You're leading a bunch of academic departments, each with their own, let's say, personalities and priorities.
So you're wrangling these groups of often very strong-willed academics.
That's one way to put it. And you're responsible for making sure they're all on board with the university's big picture goals.
Right, because it's not like every department's automatically on the same page, even within the same school, right?
Exactly. And just like, say, a conductor needs to understand how each instrument contributes to the orchestra, a dean needs to grasp what makes each department tick.
So working directly with the school principal, department heads, even individual faculty members sometimes.
All of the above. They're the ones driving those strategic goals we hear so much about.
Strategic goals. Okay, that sounds a little vague to me. What are we actually talking about here in practical terms?
Sure, it's more than just churning out research papers, though obviously that's a big part of it, especially depending on the university.
Yeah, you're judged on that output, for sure.
But it's also about prestige,
Hmm.
attracting top talent, both professors, A&D students, maybe even launching new research initiatives, the kind of things that get your institution on the map, get people talking.
Right, making a name for yourself. It's interesting, the guide really stresses promoting the faculty internationally. It speaks to how much more connected academia has become, don't you think?
100%. Universities, they're competing on a global scale now. And the dean of faculty, they're kind of like the brand ambassador for their area.
So we're talking international conferences, wooing potential donors.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even figuring out how to make those programs attractive to students from all different backgrounds. It's a lot more than just, faculty meetings and dusty old libraries.
You're telling me these deans are out in the world hustling?
In a way, yeah. They have to be persuasive, able to think strategically, and definitely savvy negotiators. Whether that's securing funding for a new lab or attracting a big-name scholar, those skills are essential.
Okay, so becoming a dean of faculty, it's not exactly a walk in the park, is it? Sounds like a pretty demanding role requiring this blend of like academic chops and serious leadership skills. But how do you actually get there? What's the path look like?
And that's where things get really interesting. The RoleCatcher Guide, it lays out this career progression that's, well, it's not exactly a straight line.
You mentioned junior faculty administrators before. It seems like they start with a lot of the groundwork.
Right, they're essential.
The guide mentions this example of Sarah Jones, who worked at UCLA. She called herself the glue holding the department together, which I love. It sounds like she handled everything, course schedules, faculty travel, you name it.
It's a lot, but someone's got to do it.
Essential, but maybe not the most glamorous, huh?
Well, everyone starts somewhere. And often, that's that first rung on the ladder towards becoming dean. Then you move up, senior faculty administrator. And it's not just keeping things running smoothly anymore. You start having a voice, in the actual decisions.
So less paperwork, more, say, in the department's direction.
Exactly. There's an example in the guide, a senior faculty administrator. They were negotiating vendor contracts
Oh, wow. Okay, big leagues.
to get the best equipment for their labs. So yeah, that's a far cry from, like you said, just booking flights and stuff.
Definitely. It highlights how even the roles that seem purely administrative, they still require strategy. You need to be able to think ahead.
100%.
Yeah.
And that kind of experience, that's what preps you for the next jump, which is associate dean.
Now, that feels like a big leap from managing operations to actually leading people.
Oh, it is. As associate dean, you're working directly with the dean, sometimes running entire departments. You're the face of the faculty externally, building relationships with alumni, potential donors. It's trial by fire, learning to navigate those, shall we say, complexities of university politics.
Sounds like you're in the pressure picker, proving you can handle the big leagues. Kind of like the dean's right-hand person, getting a feel for the big picture.
You got it. And if you kill it in that role, well, then you might find yourself on that short list for the big job. When it opens up, that is.
Right, because it's not like those spots open up every day.
Exactly, but hold on, there's one more step on this ladder before we get to the fancy title of dean, right?
The vice dean.
Bingo. The vice dean, that's the dean in training. Even more responsibility, working closely with the dean on those long-term plans, the whole 9 yards.
So by the time you actually become dean, you've had years probably of increasingly complex roles. You've managed people, navigated budgets, you understand how the university system works.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, that's for
Mhm.
sure. And the RoleCatcher guide, it really hammers home that each stage of this journey, it needs its own skill set. Being a brilliant academic, that's great, but it's not enough.
So you're saying it takes more than just, what, brain power to climb that ivory tower? Color me intrigued. What are those must-have skills the Roll-Catcher Guide talks about?
Well, it goes beyond the degrees and the publications. It's they call soft skills that can make or break a dean.
The stuff that doesn't always make it onto the CV, right?
Sadly, yeah. We've touched on managing a team of department heads, each with their own, well, let's be honest, egos.
Herding cats, as they say.
The guide actually uses the phrase trying to herd butterflies, which I kind of love.
That's a good one.
Each one brilliant, independent, but needing that guiding hand to actually achieve something together.
And that's where leadership, management, that stuff becomes essential. But there's more to it than just the people side, right? You need strategy, too.
Big time. A good dean, they're not just reacting to what's on their desk today. They're thinking years ahead.
Anticipating the challenges before they become problems.
Exactly. And the guide highlights this great example. A dean at Stanford, she spearheaded this whole new program, totally interdisciplinary, focused on AI and ethics.
Wow, timely.
Right. That kind of forward-thinking leadership, that's what makes a difference. But even with the best vision, you got to be able to pay for it. And that often means
Budgeting, that's a whole other skill set, right?
sure. That's for sure. The guide points out that, frankly, a lot of academics, they don't have much experience managing large budgets.
Which is different from, like, getting a grant for your own research lab.
Night and day.
Yeah.
You're responsible for entire departments now.
Right.
It means making tough calls, prioritizing, justifying those choices to the higher-ups.
High-stakes poker. So it really seems like this guide, it pulls back the curtain on the whole dean of faculty thing. It gives a much more realistic and, frankly, fascinating view than I had before. But what about the interview process itself? That's always felt like a black box to me.
Well, that's where the RoleCatcher interview guide blew me away, honestly. They're using data to demystify it, and the feedback you can get is tailored to you.
You mentioned their database of practice interview questions. That thing's massive, Rep.
Massive is an understatement. Over 120,000 questions, all specific to certain careers, certain skill sets, and not just generic stuff either. They've got questions tailored for aspiring deans, covering everything from like how you handle conflict to, are you good with money?
Yeah, that's incredible. 120,000 questions. Honestly, I'd be overwhelmed to prep with that much info. It's amazing how AI is changing the game, even for academia.
Right. It's about leveling the playing field. So you don't need to know the secret handshake anymore or have all these connections to figure out what they're looking for. The information is out there.
And it's not just about acing the interview either. The whole RoleCatcher platform, it feels like a gold mine if you're, well, even thinking about higher ed admin as a career.
Totally agree. Their employer database alone, it's got over 9 million entries, which is just, wow. Plus thousands of those career guides, online resources covering all sorts of roles you find at a university.
It really does make you wonder what other careers are out there that we think we understand, but...
But there's this whole layer of complexity we're missing. That's what I love about these deep dives,
Yeah.
honestly. They challenge your assumptions, make you realize there's always more to learn.
Couldn't agree more. So whether this has got you thinking about becoming a dean yourself or just piqued your curiosity about what goes on behind the scenes in academia, hopefully we've given you a new appreciation for the folks who lead in higher education. It's definitely not all ivory towers and dusty books.